Hello everyone, thanks for dropping by, and a happy new year to you all. In case you didn't recognise her, that's Amelia Fox on the screen. She's the daughter of Edward Fox, who played the Jackal in the 1960s movie The Day of the Jackal, and I've only seen him also in Edward and Mrs Simpson, the British TV drama about the abdication crisis. And Amelia there, would I date her if I was super wealthy? Nope. She's a centimetre taller than me, and she's had a checkered relationship, and she's been married once and divorced, and she's also had a daughter with one of her partners. Plus she's 50 years old now, so age-wise it's okay, but the guys that she's always been with, they're all been knocking on the door of 6 foot. So even if I was super wealthy, I probably wouldn't bother with her. Besides, Amelia there comes from Hammersmith in London. Well, Hammersmith is a checkered area, but if it was the part of Hammersmith next door to Chelsea or Kensington, it'd be a really posh area, so that gives you an idea of the kind of background that Amelia has. So even if I was super wealthy, I wouldn't even bother if she was single and available, because we're just worlds apart. I doubt she'd even know where Warrington was, so never mind. Now, Amelia, as I said, has been divorced, so on the Sandman's memes of the week, on the when did I see it? Sunday. There's a new thing coming around called a quiet divorce. I hadn't heard of that, so I had a look around and I found loads of stuff. This is one of the first things. This is, as you can see, is CNN Health, and this was done on April 26th this year. Signs in a silent divorce allowed in Clear. It's Carly and her husband. When they were first married, they didn't fight much. When things started to go downhill in her marriage, she and her now ex turned to couples workbook to figure things out. I would prefer not to talk about things because it was very difficult to communicate in general, she says. The mother of one child didn't want to include her last name due to privacy concerns. At one point she asked her husband to move out of their Tampa home in Tampa, Florida. He says, "No, I'm not surprised. We'll figure it out under our own roof." But he moved his things into the guest bedroom in the family home and began sleeping there. In other words, separate rooms and separate beds. That's the first red flag. After a year of doing that, the couple decided to end their marriage, but leading up to that point they continued living together in the same home, raising their daughter. A daughter would have suspected things, because children are very keen and quick to catch up on little signs that the parents are not getting on, and appeared like a couple to the outside world. He became a stranger to me that I was still married to under the same roof in a year's time, and then we got divorced. Who got the family home? And then it said, although the legal proceedings came later, the couple were already going through what's often called a silent divorce. And then we got all examples of what a silent divorce is. Well, that's CNN. That was done on April, about just before the midway mark of last year. Now you fast forward to April 28th, the New York Post got wind of this new thing. Experts say there are red flags that may indicate you're in a silent divorce. And if you don't down, you may still be in a wedding ring, but if you feel more like a roommate than a romantic partner, experts say your marriage may already be toast. The phrase silent divorce refers to couples who stay under the same roof, but their emotional connection is long gone. And then more yada yada about it. If you don't really work on a marriage, it could lead to an emotional disconnect where two people are just not on the same page anymore. Other signs are totally out there include feeling more like roommates than romantic partners, at the previous article, in a marriage, and not fighting, because as dysfunctional as it sounds, an argument can mean two people still care enough to battle it out. And then, speaking of divorce red flags, the unexpected one is a subtle smirk of superiority on your spouse's face, according to psychologist blah blah blah. His research dissected the Unplanned podcast, said that criticism, contempt, defensiveness and stonewalling are present in a marriage. It might be doomed. In other words, a silent treatment. If you get a whiff of If you get a whiff of contempt either from yourself or your partner, try to tackle it head on before things get worse. Its recommended body language expert Vanessa Van Edwards asks, "What's going on? Are you okay? How are you feeling? Want to be here?" Because you're giving air to somewhat that contempt, and so it can be addressed, she explained to the show hosts Matt and Abby Howard, whoever they are. Well, that's the New York Post. It's also cottoned on the British press. This is a British newspaper, even though it's leaning toward the left. What is quite divorced invisible breakup process that is going viral. Apparently it's on the rise everywhere. A legal divorce is usually the final step in a separation that happened long before. Hey up. This is a Fox interview, and apparently in America there's a thing called National Divorce Day, usually in March, so don't know who they are. It says some relationships end loudly and most quietly. There is no dramatic fight or sudden revelation. Instead, partners gradually stop showing up for each other in small everyday ways. And then more yada yada about it. The danger of emotional disengaging. Relationships can unravel in different ways, as American psychologist, the previous article. Some couples experience escalating conflict early on. But for many long-term partnerships, the earliest signs of trouble are subtle movements of emotional withdrawal or small bids for connection that go unanswered. In other words, she gives you the cold shoulder. She doesn't want to be touched or approached. The same way is him, if he gives her the cold shoulder. Instead, relationship bids come in different forms. A funny message during the day of pointing out a bird on a walk, when partners turn towards them with interest and warmth. Closeness is strengthened. When those bids are ignored or brushed aside, distance slowly grows. And then you notice this word going through these articles. There's loads of them I've found, but these ones are picked for this video. Boredom is a common theme through it. Boredom, a sense of predictability, stagnation and dismissed excitement is another key driver to show relational decline. And then why the term resonates right now, more yada yada yada. And then marriage is not about love, about mum and dad's sex life. It's about building a future, bouncing great grandkids on your knee on the holidays. It's hard, grueling, thankless, often lonesome labour, and the rewards take decades to arrive. Read more. If you think you might bump your spouse and kids in the street simply because no one is touching your stinky bits, or you're not in love, marriage isn't for you. It's the 21st century. It's okay to enjoy the single lifestyle. My mum and dad used to get on each other's nerves, and mum and dad used to bicker a lot. I've witnessed that firsthand. But mum and dad were married for just short of 70 years, so, as this says, the marriage is hard, grueling and thankless, but you have to work on your marriage. Obviously, if you're going for a quiet divorce, marriage wasn't really for you. Anyway, back to these articles. I found this. This was 6th of December. This was done 1st of December this year. Quiet divorce is on the rise. Is your marriage doomed? This is Vice. Quiet divorce is the kind of term that blown up online because people recognise themselves in it before they're ready to admit it out loud. And then more psychologists, the same person again. Quiet divorcing often begins with boredom. Whoops. You notice that word again? Modern pressure cooker doesn't help either. Ellie Finnick's work on marriage argues that today's couples expect relationships to be emotionally rich. In other words, they've got the fantasy, the Hollywood movie. The woman wants the marriage, a wedding ceremony, but not the marriage. And quiet divorcing is always mean it's over. Doesn't always mean it's over. Small moments that people overlook can cause distance, which might also help reconnect when given authentic attention. Noticing little things, showing gratitude, and adding some fresh experience to daily habits can change the course. In other words, you can work at it, little things. That's Vice. And I found this, the Harper's Bazaar for India of all places. This is the interesting article. Women over 40 are choosing to quiet divorce. Middle-aged women are walking out of marriage without noise, choosing peace over performance. You've seen a lot of these women on TikTok. They just thrown the marriage away because they probably got bored and they just walked out on it, thinking they could do better. This is the phrase many women in long-term marriage never talk about, the shift from fighting for a relationship to quietly stepping out of it, emotionally first, physically later. It's not dramatic. No midnight suitcase packing, no slamming doors, no final showdown. Instead, it's a slow unthreading, a private retreat, a long-held breath finally released. And across the world, more women aged 40 are embracing that, what's called a quiet divorce, a silent checking out of marriages that have drained them for years. He says, these women are not necessarily signing legal papers or posting life updates. They are simply done, and for once they are putting that decision above everything society has taught them to endure. In other words, they didn't want to be married anymore. They thought they were missing out. They've seen all the women that they used to go with, going on parties and going abroad on vacations, and they said, I want some of that, but we all know how that turns out, don't we? It says, the quiet divorce is born and has lived in service of families, service of partners, blah, 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 and not to forget the invisible emotional labour. Many of these women have spent years being the glue, the organiser, the caretaker, the solver. They've been told stability is more important than happiness, that marriage is a badge of honour, and that their sacrifices make them a good woman. But then we get to the, interesting bit, but as they enter their 40s, often the most clarifying decade, including shifts after years of carrying the mental load and emotional responsibility, the burnout is no longer something they can push past. What begins as exhaustion turns into quiet re-evaluation. What would my life look like if I chose myself? In other words, they think they can do better, so they divorce and get back on the dating carousel. But we all know how that turns out for them. And then yada yada about divorce, quiet divorce, impact on the family, why a quiet divorce instead of resolving or filing. And that's Bizarre India. Now that's not just in America. I found this is from Emily Impett in the University of Toronto. So quiet divorcing is obviously going on in Canada as well. Quiet divorcing puts a new name to an old problem, the slow erosion of intimacy. Danger of emotional disengaging. Here we go. Boredom makes reconnecting harder. And why the term resonates now? The term resonates with contemporary culture pressures. A US psychology professor argues in his book, All or Nothing Marriage, today's couples often expect relationship to be not just secure and supportive, but personally fulfilling and exciting. In other words, the woman doesn't understand what it needs to be a wife, and she's got, if her previous life before she got married was exciting and going on all sorts of girls' night out and hot girls' summer stuff, then she gets married and all that's gone. When passion fades, it is naturally for many couples over time. The shift is interrupted, not as normal but as a sign that something is fundamentally broken. And then they get bored, and then quiet divorce, and they're gone. Now the lawyers, etc., have seen this coming as a new way to make money, so I found this. A Brain-Osley. Their locations. They work in Dallas, Palno, wherever that is, in that big Texas, Austin, in Texas, San Antonio, that'd be California, Fort Worth, that'd be Texas, Granbury, Texas, and Midland in Texas. All Texas, so it's a Texas-based lawyer understanding silent divorce. And then sales pitch about it, recognizing signs of silent divorce, emotional distance, indifference, minimal communication, as the other articles have mentioned, loss of physical intimacy, separate social lives, that first article there, apathy instead of conflict, shouting matches, intense fights can be unhealthy, but a complete lack of conflict can signal emotional detachment. Here's another American family lawyer about family law, where we serve, a place, Grand Rapids, wherever that is in America, Michigan, Georgetown, Holland, Forest Hills, Rockford, Caledonia, Hudson, Jenison. I have no idea where any of those places are. And here we have another one. The Lawrence Hotspur III, attorney at law. Now, where's they're based? Jacksonville, NC, that would be North Carolina. And if you didn't want to go to a lawyer, you can want to go to therapy. Keith here in Washington, D.C. is a therapist for marriage. When your marriage becomes another work project, it says silent divorce is described legally married experiencing complete emotional withdrawal. Earliest signs often appear in small ways. Differs from legal separation. Is it healthy? No. Silent divorce is not healthy for anyone involved. The chronic loneliness, decreased self-worth, anxiety, depression, resentment, and of course, children are remarkably perceptive. They notice when parents avoid eye contact, when affection disappears, when conversations feel strange. The children are always the ones that suffer in a divorce, not the parents. And to round this up, because they're probably on 20 minutes now, even Oprah has jumped on the silent divorce bandwagon, because I found this, why so many couples are opting for a silent divorce. And if you scroll down, most most of what it's been on before. Silent divorce can be financial necessity. Kelly Carperson, never heard of her. Also common when you have children. Can lift a silence on a need-to-know basis. Shouldn't be a secret forever. And that's it. But she also goes on when divorce at 60 was the best thing ever. Starting in later life felt impossible until I realized I was the architect of my own future. 6 springs ago I joined the official singles crowd when my ex-husband forwarded an email from his attorney that the subject line, "You are divorced." I wonder why she got divorced by her husband at 60. How many years were they married? But anyway, apparently quiet divorce is on the rise all over America and the Western world, and especially amongst women over 40. They think they can do better, but within probably 2 or 3 years of ending their marriage, they wish that they'd gone back with their husband, because we all seen what they're like on TikTok. But I'll try and find something more on this divorce thing, especially as we get closer to March, because the March is supposed to be the month for getting divorced in America and Canada and most probably over here in Britain. But for now, you know the routine, people. Like, dislike, comment, etc. Completely up to you. So until next Monday, that's it from me. Bye-bye.